The customs agent's latex glove snapped as she reached into the suitcase, her fingers closing around cold metal. You're under arrest. But when Detective Sarah Chen flashed her badge, the accuser's face went white. Some people hunt for trouble. Others wear it like a second skin. In 20 seconds, a jealous neighbor's lie would unravel into the fluorescent lights of JFK's customs inspection area cast harsh shadows across Detective Sarah Chen's face as she stood beside her wife, Maya, watching their honeymoon luggage disappear into the X-ray machine. The Caribbean sun had kissed their skin golden over the past 2 weeks, but now, back in the sterile chaos of international arrivals, Sarah felt the familiar weight of returning to reality. Next. The customs officer's voice cut through the ambient noise of rolling suitcases and tired conversations in a dozen languages. Sarah squeezed Maya's hand as they approached the counter. After 15 years as a detective with the NYPD, she'd learned to read people's faces like road signs, and something in the officer's expression made her instincts prickle. The man's nameplate read Thompson, and his eyes held the particular kind of intensity that came with a tip-off. "Passports, please," Thompson said, his tone professional but cold. Maya, still glowing from their honeymoon bliss, smiled as she handed over their documents. "Beautiful day, isn't it? We just got back from St. Lucia. Most incredible 2 weeks of our lives." Thompson barely glanced at her, his attention focused on Sarah with laser precision. "I'm going to need you to step over here for additional screening." Sarah's stomach tightened. "Is there a problem?" "Random selection," Thompson replied, but his eyes said otherwise. "Please place your bags on the examination table." The secondary inspection area felt like an interrogation room disguised as a processing station. Sarah had been in enough of both to know the difference. Maya's confusion was palpable as they were separated, her voice rising with concern. "Sarah, what's happening?" "Why are they? It's okay, baby," Sarah called out, forcing calm into her voice. "Just routine." But nothing about this felt routine. Thompson's partner, Officer Martinez, emerged from behind the counter carrying a tablet, her expression grave. She whispered something to Thompson, who nodded grimly. "Detective Chen," Thompson said, and Sarah's blood ran cold. He knew her rank, her name, information that wouldn't be in their travel documents. "We received a credible tip about suspicious items in your luggage." "What kind of tip?" Sarah's voice sharpened, her detective instincts overriding her shock. "Anonymous report suggested you might be transporting weapons illegally obtained during your travels." Thompson's hands moved methodically as he opened Sarah's suitcase. Caribbean islands are known for their black market activities. Sarah's mind raced. Anonymous tip. Someone had called in a report about her specifically. This wasn't random, this was targeted. But who? And why? "I'm a police detective," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the chaos building in her chest. "I can show you my identification." "We'll verify that," Martinez said, her tone suggesting she'd already made up her mind about Sarah's guilt. "But first, we need to complete this inspection." Maya pressed against the barrier separating them, her face pale with growing panic. "Sarah, tell them who you are. Show them your badge." But Sarah's badge was exactly where any smart cop would keep it during international travel, locked in her checked luggage, along with her service weapon, properly declared and secured according to federal regulations. She'd followed every protocol, done everything by the book. Thompson's hands moved through their belongings with practiced efficiency. Sunscreen, souvenirs, Maya's collection of shell jewelry from the beach markets. Each item was examined, photographed, set aside. The process felt endless, humiliating, designed to break down resistance through sheer bureaucratic weight. "Here," Thompson said, his voice changing tone. His gloved hand had found something in the side pocket of Sarah's carry-on bag. He pulled out a small, wrapped package about the size of a deck of cards. Sarah's heart stopped. "That's not mine." This was in your bag," Martinez said, moving closer. "Can you explain what this is?" The package was wrapped in brown paper, sealed with tape. Sarah had never seen it before in her life, but she recognized the setup immediately. Someone had planted evidence in her bag. Someone who knew she was a cop, knew she was traveling, knew exactly how to destroy her life with surgical precision. I've never seen that before, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. Someone planted that in my bag. That's what they all say, Thompson muttered, but Martinez held up a hand. Let's unwrap it, she said, her voice taking on the careful tone of someone who understood they were potentially handling explosives. The paper tore away to reveal a small metal object that made Sarah's blood run cold. It was a disassembled firing pin from a handgun, small enough to be overlooked by most security screenings, but definitely illegal to transport without proper declaration. Detective Chen, Martinez said, her voice now carrying the weight of official authority, you're under arrest for attempted smuggling of weapons components. The world tilted. Sarah's 15 years of spotless service, her reputation, her career, all of it was crumbling because of a piece of metal she'd never seen before. She could hear Maya crying behind the barrier, could see the growing crowd of travelers stopping to stare at the commotion. I want to call my union representative, Sarah said, falling back on the protocols that had governed her professional life. This is a setup. Someone planted that evidence. You'll have the opportunity to make your call after processing, Thompson said, producing zip tie restraints. Turn around, please. As the plastic bit into Sarah's wrists, she caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd of onlookers. Karen Westbrook, their neighbor from Queens, stood near the coffee shop about 50 feet away. Karen's face was flushed with what looked like excitement, her phone held up as if she was recording the entire scene. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Karen, who had complained about their loud parties that never happened. Karen, who had called the city about their illegally parked cars that were perfectly legal. Karen, who had made increasingly bitter comments about Sarah's show-off cop job and Maya's teacher's pet attitude. Karen, who had access to their travel plans because Maya had mentioned them at the neighborhood watch meeting. Karen, who worked at the airport part-time in the gift shop and would know exactly how to slip something into a bag during the chaos of international travel. As Sarah was led away, she managed to catch Karen's eye across the crowded terminal. For just a moment, Karen's mask of concerned citizenship slipped, revealing the ugly satisfaction underneath. She'd finally found a way to hurt the happy couple who made her own bitter life feel smaller by comparison. But Karen had made one crucial mistake in her elaborate revenge plot. She'd assumed that destroying Sarah's career would be enough to satisfy her jealousy. She'd assumed that a decorated detective would crumble under the weight of false accusations. Sarah Chen had spent 15 years putting criminals behind bars. She'd learned to think like them, to anticipate their moves, to turn their own tactics against them. And now, as she was processed through the system she'd served her entire adult life, she was already 3 steps ahead of the woman who'd tried to destroy her. Karen Westbrook wanted to play games with a cop's life. She was about to learn that some games had consequences she never imagined. The handcuffs clicked shut, but Sarah's mind was already free, already working the case that would determine the rest of her life. In the reflection of the window, she could see Karen still watching, still savoring her moment of triumph. Enjoy it while it lasts, Sarah thought. Because when I'm done with you, you're going to wish you'd never heard my name. The holding cell at JFK's federal detention facility smelled like disinfectant and despair. Sarah sat on the narrow bench, her mind working through the evidence like a chess master planning 15 moves ahead. 3 hours had passed since her arrest, and she'd used every minute to reconstruct the timeline of Karen's setup. The door buzzed open, and a woman in an expensive suit stepped in. Attorney Jennifer Walsh, Sarah's union representative, looked like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Detective Chen, Walsh said, settling into the plastic chair across from the bench. I'm going to be straight with you. This is bad. Really bad. How bad? Federal weapons trafficking charges. If convicted, you're looking at 5 to 10 years, loss of pension, permanent ban from law enforcement. Walsh opened her briefcase with sharp, efficient movements. The evidence is solid. They found the firing pin in your bag, you had motive to obtain weapons overseas, and there's video of you packing that exact bag at the hotel. Sarah's jaw tightened. What video? Hotel security footage from St. Lucia. Shows you packing your carry-on the morning of departure. The prosecution will argue you had opportunity to conceal the weapon component. I never put that firing pin in my bag, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fury building in her chest. Someone planted it. Who? And when? Walsh's tone suggested she'd heard this story before. Airport security is extensive. The only opportunity would have been before I got to the airport, Sarah interrupted. Someone with access to my bag before security screening. Walsh raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting someone broke into your hotel room? I'm suggesting someone with legitimate access planted evidence in my bag. Sarah leaned forward. Jennifer, I need you to subpoena the airport employment records. Specifically, anyone who works in the gift shop or retail areas near the international arrivals gate. That's a fishing expedition. The judge will never, Karen Westbrook, Sarah said, watching Walsh's expression carefully. My neighbor. She works part-time at the Hudson News in Terminal 4. She was there during my arrest, filming everything. Walsh's pen stopped moving. You saw her? Not just saw her. I saw her reaction. She was enjoying the show. Sarah stood, pacing the small cell. Karen has been harassing Maya and me for months. Noise complaints, parking violations, HOA disputes. She's been escalating, and this is her endgame. Even if that's true, proving it is going to be nearly impossible, Walsh said. The prosecution has physical evidence. You're offering conspiracy theories. Then we need to make them more than theories. Sarah sat back down, her detective instincts taking over. I need you to contact my partner, Detective Rodriguez. Have him run a background check on Karen Westbrook. Financial records, employment history, any connections to weapons trafficking. Sarah, you're facing federal charges. This isn't the time for amateur detective work. This is exactly the time, Sarah snapped. Because in about 6 hours, I'm going to be in front of a federal magistrate who's going to decide whether I spend the next 5 years in prison or go home to my wife. And the only way I'm going home is if we can prove this was a setup. Walsh closed her briefcase with a sharp click. I'll make the calls. But Sarah, you need to prepare for the possibility that this doesn't go your way. The system doesn't like cops who cry frame up. After Walsh left, Sarah was alone with her thoughts and the growing certainty that Karen's plan was more sophisticated than it appeared. The timing was too perfect, the evidence too clean. Someone had coached Karen, given her the technical knowledge to pull off a credible setup. 2 hours later, the door buzzed again. This time, it was Detective Luis Rodriguez, Sarah's partner for the past 5 years. His face was grim, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. Jesus, Sarah, he said, slumping into the chair. When I got the call, I thought it was a joke. It's not a joke, Luis. It's a setup. What did you find on Karen Westbrook? Rodriguez pulled out a small notebook. Divorced 3 years ago. Bitter custody battle. Lost her house in the settlement. She's been working 3 part-time jobs to make ends meet, including the airport gig. Financial problems make people desperate, Sarah said. What else? This is where it gets interesting. Her ex-husband is Marcus Westbrook. Ring any bells? Sarah's blood went cold. Marcus Westbrook. I arrested him 2 years ago for illegal weapon sales. Bingo. He did 18 months, got out 6 months ago. Guess who he's been staying with while he gets back on his feet? Karen. Karen. Rodriguez leaned forward. And here's the kicker. Marcus had connections to Caribbean weapons smuggling operations. He'd know exactly what kind of evidence would be believable in a setup like this. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. This wasn't just a jealous neighbor's revenge plot. This was a coordinated attack by someone with inside knowledge of both the legal system and weapons trafficking. Marcus had the expertise, Karen had the access, and together they'd crafted a frame-up designed to destroy Sarah's life. There's more, Rodriguez said. I checked the airport employment records. Karen requested extra shifts during the week you were returning from your honeymoon. She specifically asked to work the international arrivals area. She was positioned to plant the evidence, Sarah said. But how did she get access to my bag? That's the million-dollar question. Airport security footage shows you carrying your bag through the terminal, but there's a blind spot near the restrooms about 50 feet from the customs area. 30-second window where someone could have made contact. Sarah closed her eyes, picturing the scene. The chaos of international arrivals, hundreds of people moving through the terminal, the confusion of jet lag and long lines. It would have been simple for someone to bump into her, apologize, and slip something into her bag during the momentary distraction. "Lewis, I need you to do something for me," Sarah said, her voice taking on the commanding tone she used in the field. "I need you to find Marcus Westbrook. Bring him in for questioning on any pretext you can find. Parole violation, whatever. And I need you to search Karen's apartment." "Sarah, I can't just, you can and you will," Sarah interrupted. "Because if we don't move fast, Karen and Marcus are going to disappear, and I'm going to spend the next decade in federal prison for a crime I didn't commit." Rodriguez nodded grimly. "What about the arraignment?" "I'll handle that. Walsh is good at her job, even if she doesn't believe me yet. But by the time we are done, we are going to have enough evidence to bury Karen and Marcus both." As Rodriguez left, Sarah felt the familiar rush of a case coming together. The same instincts that had made her a decorated detective were now working to save her own life. But she was also acutely aware that she was playing against the clock. Federal prosecutors moved fast, and once charges were filed, the presumption of innocence became an uphill battle. The door buzzed a third time, and Sarah was surprised to see Maya, her face streaked with tears but her expression determined. "Baby," Maya said, rushing to embrace her. "I'm so sorry. I should have been watching our bags more carefully." "This isn't your fault," Sarah said, holding her wife tight. "This is Karen's fault. Karen and her ex-husband." "Karen." Maya pulled back, confusion replacing tears. "What does Karen have to do with this?" Sarah quickly explained the connections Rodriguez had uncovered. As she spoke, Maya's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to fury. "That vindictive bitch," Maya said, her teacher's vocabulary taking a hard turn. "She's been planning this for months. All those complaints, all those nasty comments about us being too happy for the neighborhood. Maya, I need you to think carefully. Did Karen ever have access to our apartment? Our luggage? Anything?" Maya's face went pale. "The building management inspection last month. Remember? They had to check all the units for water damage after the pipe burst on the 4th floor. And Karen was there. She was helping coordinate with the building management company. She had master keys, Sarah. She could have gotten into our apartment anytime." The final piece clicked into place. Karen hadn't just planted evidence at the airport, she'd been inside their home, learning their routines, their travel plans, their habits. She'd probably planted a tracking device or found their travel documents, giving her the information she needed to time the setup perfectly. "Maya, I need you to call Rodriguez. Tell him to get a search warrant for our apartment. If Karen planted evidence in my bag, she might have left other evidence in our home." As Maya left to make the call, Sarah felt the familiar satisfaction of a case breaking open. But she also felt the weight of what was at stake. Karen and Marcus weren't just trying to frame her for a crime, they were trying to destroy everything she'd built, everything she cared about. The arraignment was in 4 hours. By then, Sarah would either have enough evidence to expose the frame-up, or she'd be remanded to federal custody to await trial. There was no middle ground, no plea bargain that would save her career and reputation. But Karen Westbrook had made one crucial mistake in her elaborate revenge plot. She'd assumed that framing a cop would be the end of the story. She'd never considered that some cops don't just enforce the law, they embody it, live it, breathe it until it becomes part of their DNA. Sarah Chen had spent 15 years learning to think like a criminal so she could catch them. Now she was a Detective Luis Rodriguez sat in his unmarked car outside Marcus Westbrook's last known address, a rundown apartment complex in Astoria. The building manager had confirmed Marcus was staying in 3B with his sister, but Rodriguez needed more than confirmation, he needed leverage. His phone buzzed. A text from the lab, partial prints on airport security footage. Running through database now. Rodriguez smiled grimly. Sarah's instincts were proving correct, but they needed concrete evidence before the arraignment in 2 hours. He stepped out of the car and approached the building, his hand instinctively checking his weapon. The apartment door was answered by a thin woman with nervous eyes, Karen Westbrook, though she looked nothing like the confident neighbor who'd been terrorizing Sarah and Maya. Her face was pale, her hands shaking slightly as she recognized the detective's badge. Ms. Westbrook, I'm Detective Rodriguez, NYPD. I need to speak with Marcus Westbrook. He's not here, Karen said quickly, but her eyes darted toward the back of the apartment. I'm going to need you to step aside. We have a warrant for Mr. Westbrook's arrest on parole violation charges. It was a bluff, Rodriguez didn't have a warrant yet, but Karen's reaction told him everything he needed to know. She stepped back, her composure cracking. Marcus, she called out. There's a cop here. The sound of running footsteps came from the back of the apartment, followed by a door slamming. Rodriguez keyed his radio as he pushed past Karen. All units, suspect fleeing eastbound from 42 to 15 Northern Boulevard. White male, approximately 5 feet 10 inches, wearing a blue hoodie. But Rodriguez's attention was already focused on what Marcus had left behind. The apartment was a treasure trove of evidence, airport terminal maps with handwritten notes, a small bag of firing pins identical to the one found in Sarah's luggage, and most damning of all, a laptop with search histories detailing Caribbean weapons trafficking routes. Karen Westbrook, Rodriguez said, his voice taking on the formal tone of an arrest, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit federal weapons trafficking fraud. You don't understand, Karen said, backing against the wall. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. We just wanted to teach her a lesson. Teach you a lesson. That bitch Sarah Chen. Always acting like she's better than everyone else. Perfect job, perfect wife, perfect life. She needed to be brought down a peg. Rodriguez continued searching while Karen talked, her confession spilling out in a rush of justification and self-pity. In the bedroom closet, he found airline receipts and a detailed timeline of Sarah's honeymoon, information that could only have come from inside knowledge of their travel plans. How did you know their exact flight information? Karen's face flushed. Maya mentioned it at the neighborhood association meeting. She was so excited about their trip, going on and on about their itinerary. It made me sick. So you decided to frame a decorated police officer for federal crimes. Marcus said it would just be enough to get her suspended, maybe fired. We didn't think you didn't think it would destroy her life. Cost her everything she'd worked for. Rodriguez's anger was barely contained. You planted evidence to frame an innocent woman for federal weapons trafficking. The laptop screen showed Marcus's recent communications. Rodriguez's blood ran cold as he read the messages. This wasn't just about revenge, Marcus had been planning to use Sarah's arrest as cover for a real weapons smuggling operation. The frame-up was designed to focus law enforcement attention on a fake case while the real crime went undetected. Karen, where is Marcus planning to make his real delivery? What delivery? I don't know what you're talking about. But Rodriguez was already calling for backup. The emails on Marcus's laptop detailed a weapons shipment arriving at JFK that afternoon, timed to coincide with Sarah's arraignment when airport security would be distracted by media coverage of the corrupt cop scandal. Meanwhile, across town, Sarah was being transported to the federal courthouse for her arraignment. The prison transport van was stuffy and uncomfortable, but her mind was racing with possibilities. Maya had texted her earlier with crucial information. Their apartment had been searched, and investigators had found evidence of tampering with their luggage locks. As the van pulled up to the courthouse, Sarah could see the media circus waiting. News vans lined the street, reporters clutching microphones, cameras trained on the building entrance. Someone had leaked her arrest to the press, turning her personal nightmare into public spectacle. Detective Chen, said U.S. Marshal Janet Torres as she helped Sarah out of the van. Your attorney is waiting inside. Word of advice, keep your head down and don't say anything to the reporters. But as they walked toward the courthouse steps, Sarah spotted a familiar figure in the crowd. Marcus Westbrook, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, was standing near the media scrum with what looked like a cell phone camera. He was documenting the scene, probably planning to sell the footage to news outlets. Sarah's mind raced. If Marcus was here, who was handling the weapons shipment at JFK? The answer hit her like a physical blow: there was no weapons shipment. Marcus was here because this was the real operation. He wasn't just framing her, he was planning something at the courthouse. Marshal Torres, Sarah said urgently, I need to speak with courthouse security immediately. There's a credible threat. Detective, now's not the time for that man in the baseball cap, Sarah interrupted, nodding toward Marcus. He's the one who framed me. If he's here instead of running, it means he's planning something. Torres followed Sarah's gaze and her expression hardened. With 15 years of federal law enforcement experience, she recognized the signs of a setup. She keyed her radio. Control, this is Torres. I need immediate backup at the main entrance. Possible security threat. As they reached the courthouse steps, Marcus began moving through the crowd, his hand reaching into his jacket. Sarah's training kicked in as she recognized the body language of someone preparing to draw a weapon. Gun. Sarah shouted, throwing herself sideways to tackle Torres to the ground as Marcus pulled out what looked like a modified pistol. The crowd erupted in chaos. Reporters scattered, their cameras falling as they dove for cover. Security guards rushed toward the disturbance, but Marcus was already moving, using the panic as cover. Federal agents. Torres shouted, drawing her weapon. Drop your weapon. But Marcus wasn't planning to shoot anyone. Sarah realized with growing horror that the gun wasn't the real threat, it was a distraction. While security focused on the armed man, someone else was moving through the crowd, someone with access to the courthouse who could plant explosives or create a larger disturbance. Karen. Sarah shouted, spotting the woman moving toward the courthouse entrance with a large bag. She's got a bomb. Torres spun around, her weapon tracking between two targets. In the split second of hesitation, Marcus disappeared into the crowd while Karen reached the security checkpoint. Stop. Torres commanded, but Karen was already through the metal detectors, her bag apparently clean. Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. If Karen had gotten past security, it meant she either had inside help or the explosive device was designed to avoid detection. The answer came to her in a flash of understanding: Karen worked at the airport. She had access to security protocols, knew how to construct devices that would pass through standard screenings. She's going for the courtroom, Sarah said, struggling against her restraints. She knows I'm scheduled for arraignment in 15 minutes. She's going to try to take out the judge, the prosecutor, everyone involved in the case. Torres was already moving, speaking rapidly into a radio. Lock down the building. Code red. We have a possible explosive device in the courthouse. As alarms began blaring and evacuation procedures kicked in, Sarah felt a grim satisfaction. Marcus and Karen's plan was more sophisticated than she'd given them credit for, but they'd made one crucial mistake: they'd underestimated her ability to think like them. The frame-up was never meant to just destroy her career. It was meant to get her into federal custody, into this courthouse, at this exact moment when Karen could eliminate everyone involved in the case. No witnesses, no prosecutors, no judge, just a tragic bombing that would be blamed on terrorists or courthouse violence. But their plan had one fatal flaw: they'd assumed Sarah would be a passive victim, led to slaughter like a lamb. Instead, she'd turned their own trap against them, exposing their real agenda just in time to save lives. As federal agents swarmed the courthouse and Karen was tackled in the third-floor hallway with a backpack full of explosives, Sarah finally understood the true scope of what she was up against. This wasn't just about revenge or jealousy, it was about eliminating every person who could expose Marcus's criminal network. The bomb squad found 3 pounds of C4 explosives in Karen's bag, enough to level half the courthouse. Marcus was arrested 6 blocks away, still carrying the modified pistol he'd used to create the distraction. Standing in the courthouse lobby as the chaos subsided, Sarah felt the weight of how close they'd all come to disaster. But she also felt something else, the satisfaction of a case closed, justice served, and the knowledge that sometimes the system works exactly as it should. The arraignment was postponed indefinitely. The federal weapons trafficking charges were dropped. And Karen Westbrook, who 3 weeks after the courthouse bombing attempt, Sarah Chen sat in the FBI field office's conference room, watching Karen Westbrook through the one-way glass. The woman who had once commanded neighborhood association meetings with petty authority now looked broken, her orange jumpsuit hanging loose on her diminished frame. "She's been asking to see you," said Special Agent Diana Foster, sliding a case file across the table. "Claims she has information about other corrupt cops that Marcus was planning to target." Sarah studied the file without opening it. "She's lying. This was personal, not part of some larger conspiracy." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know her." Sarah finally opened the file, revealing photos of Karen's apartment, evidence logs, and psychological evaluation reports. Karen Westbrook isn't a criminal mastermind. She's a bitter, jealous woman who got in over her head with a real criminal. Look at the timeline, every escalation came after she reconnected with Marcus. Foster leaned back in her chair. "The prosecutors want to offer her a deal. Testify against Marcus for conspiracy to commit domestic terrorism, and she serves 15 years instead of life." "And what does Marcus get?" "If convicted on all charges, he's looking at life without parole. Domestic terrorism, weapons trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder. The prosecutor is confident they can make it stick." Sarah closed the file. "I want to talk to her." "Sarah, that's not a good idea. You're still technically a victim in this case. Any contact could compromise." "I'm not a victim anymore," Sarah interrupted. "I'm a detective who solved a case. And Karen Westbrook is going to tell me exactly why she thought she could destroy my life." 30 minutes later, Sarah sat across from Karen in the sterile interview room. The woman who had once reported her loud parties and suspicious activities to anyone who would listen could barely make eye contact. "Hello, Karen," Sarah said, her voice professionally neutral. "Detective Chen," Karen whispered. "Oh. I'm sorry. I never meant for things to go so far. You planted evidence in my luggage. You conspired with a convicted felon to frame me for federal crimes. You tried to bomb a courthouse full of innocent people." Sarah's voice remained steady, but her eyes were hard. "Exactly how far did you mean for things to go?" Karen's composure cracked. "I just wanted you to know what it felt like to lose everything. To have your perfect life fall apart. I lost my husband, my house, my kids barely talk to me. And you had everything I wanted. So you decided to destroy it. Marcus said it would just be enough to get you suspended. Maybe fired. You didn't think that framing a police officer for federal crimes would destroy her life. Or did you just not care as long as you got your revenge?" Karen's face flushed with anger, and for a moment, Sarah saw the woman who had terrorized her neighborhood with petty complaints and vindictive phone calls. "You want to know the truth? I hated you. I hated seeing you and Maya so happy when my own life was falling apart. I hated that you had respect, authority, a job that mattered. I hated that you never even noticed me enough to hate me back." "I noticed you," Sarah said quietly. "I noticed every noise complaint, every parking violation report, every time you tried to make our lives miserable. I just chose not to let it affect me." "Well, it should have," Karen snapped. "You should have been as miserable as the rest of us." Sarah stood up, her hands flat on the table. "You're right, Karen. I should have been miserable. I should have let your jealousy and bitterness drag me down to your level. But I didn't. And that's why I'm walking out of here today, and you're spending the rest of your life in prison." "Wait," Karen said as Sarah moved toward the door. I can give you information about Marcus's other contacts. Other people he was planning to target. Doesn't that count for something? Sarah paused at the door. You mean the imaginary network of corrupt cops that you're making up to try to reduce your sentence? Agent Foster already told me about your offer. We both know you're lying. I'm not lying. Marcus had a list. Other cops who arrested him or his associates. He was planning to frame them too, make it look like there was widespread corruption. In the department? Show me the list. Karen's eyes darted around the room. I don't have it with me. It's hidden in my apartment. Your apartment was searched 3 weeks ago. If there was a list, we would have found it. Sarah opened the door. Enjoy your 15 years, Karen. Try not to make any enemies in prison. As Sarah left the interview room, she felt a sense of closure she hadn't expected. Karen Westbrook had tried to destroy her life out of petty jealousy, but in the end, she'd only succeeded in destroying her own. The woman who had spent years trying to bring down her neighbors had finally brought down herself. Agent Foster was waiting in the hallway. Get what you needed. I got confirmation that Karen is exactly what I thought she was, a bitter, jealous woman who got in over her head. There's no larger conspiracy, no network of corrupt cops. Just a woman who couldn't stand seeing someone else happy. And Marcus? Marcus is a career criminal who saw an opportunity to use Karen's jealousy for his own purposes. He probably never intended to follow through on framing other cops. He just told Karen what she wanted to hear to get her cooperation. They walked toward the elevator, past the busy field office with its constant hum of federal investigations. Sarah felt strange being here as a victim rather than a law enforcement professional, but she also felt something else, pride in the system that had ultimately worked to protect her. There's something else, Foster said as they reached the elevator. The weapons trafficking charges against you have been officially dropped, but the department wants you to undergo a psychological evaluation before returning to duty. Standard protocol after a traumatic event. I understand. There's also been an internal affairs investigation into how Karen was able to access information about your travel plans. Turns out she was getting information from dispatch records through a civilian employee she was dating. Sarah's jaw tightened. Who? Tommy Valdez in communications. He was feeding her information about your calls, your schedule, your personal details. He's been terminated and is facing charges for unauthorized access to police records. The elevator doors opened and Sarah stepped inside. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Karen hadn't just been lucky with her timing, she'd had inside information about Sarah's work schedule, her travel plans, her personal life. The level of surveillance and planning was more extensive than they'd realized. Agent Foster, Sarah said as the elevator descended, I want to testify at Karen's sentencing hearing. That's your right as a victim. But Sarah, you should know that her defense attorney is going to try to paint you as a vengeful cop who's pursuing an excessive prosecution. They'll argue that Karen was manipulated by Marcus, that she's more victim than perpetrator. Let them try, Sarah said. I want the judge to hear exactly what Karen Westbrook did to my life and exactly what she was prepared to do to innocent people in that courthouse. I want her to understand that some actions have consequences that last a lifetime. The elevator reached the ground floor and Sarah stepped out into the busy lobby of the federal building. Through the glass doors, she could see Maya waiting in their car, reading a book with the patient concentration of someone who had learned to wait for justice to take its course. As Sarah walked toward the exit, she reflected on the past month. She'd gone from decorated detective to suspected federal criminal to courthouse hero to victim advocate. The experience had tested everything she believed about justice, about the system she'd served, about the fundamental fairness of the world. But it had also confirmed something she'd always known but never articulated, that good people don't always win because they are good, and bad people don't always lose because they are bad. They win or lose based on the choices they make, the actions they take, and the consequences they are willing to accept. Karen Westbrook had made her choices. She'd chosen jealousy over contentment, revenge over acceptance, destruction over construction. And now she was facing the consequences of those choices in a federal prison cell. Sarah had made different choices. She'd chosen to fight back, to use her skills and experience to expose the truth, to protect innocent people even when she was the one being attacked. And now she was walking out of the federal building as a free woman, heading home. To a wife and the life they'd built together. The automatic doors slid open and Sarah stepped into the afternoon sunlight. Maya looked up from her book and smiled, the same smile that had made Sarah fall in love with her 8 years ago. The same smile that Karen Westbrook had hated enough to risk everything trying to destroy. Ready to go home? Maya asked as Sarah got into the car. More than ready, Sarah replied. But first, I want to stop by the precinct. I need to check on a few things. As they drove through the familiar streets of Queens, Sarah felt the weight of the past month beginning to lift. The investigation was over, the prosecutions were moving forward, and she was finally free to reclaim her life. But she also felt something else, a deeper understanding of what she'd been fighting for all along. It wasn't just about her career or her reputation. It was about the principle that people shouldn't be able to destroy others out of petty jealousy or personal grudges. It was about the ID. 6 months later, Detective Sarah Chen stood at the podium in the federal courthouse, the same building where Karen Westbrook had tried to detonate 3 pounds of C4 explosives. The media circus had returned, but this time the cameras were focused on justice being served rather than scandal being manufactured. Your Honor, Sarah said, her voice carrying the weight of authority earned through 15 years of service and 6 months of hell. I want to be clear about what Karen Westbrook did to my life and what she was prepared to do to innocent people in this courthouse. Judge Margaret Hoffman nodded for her to continue. The same federal judge who would have been presiding over Sarah's arraignment, the same woman Karen had planned to murder. 6 months ago, I was a decorated police detective with an exemplary record. I was returning from my honeymoon with my wife, looking forward to starting the next chapter of our lives together. Karen Westbrook decided that my happiness was an offense that required punishment. Sarah's eyes found Karen at the defense table. The woman who had once commanded neighborhood meetings with petty authority now sat slumped in an orange jumpsuit. Her attorney whispering urgently in her ear. She didn't just plant evidence in my luggage. She violated my home, stalked my personal life, corrupted a police department employee to gain access to my private information. She conspired with a convicted felon to frame me for federal crimes that could have cost me decades in prison. Sarah paused, letting the weight of those words settle in the courtroom. But most importantly, Your Honor, she was prepared to murder you, the prosecutors, court staff, and anyone else who might have stood in the way of her revenge plot. Karen Westbrook didn't just try to destroy one police officer's career, she tried to bomb a federal courthouse. Judge Hoffman's expression was granite. Continue, Detective Chen. I've spent 6 months asking myself why. Why me? Why such an elaborate, destructive plot over neighborhood disputes? And I finally understood, Karen Westbrook represents something dangerous in our society. She represents the idea that other people's success is a personal attack, that happiness is a zero-sum game, that destroying others is an acceptable response to personal disappointment. Sarah stepped closer to the podium, her voice growing stronger. Your Honor, Karen Westbrook doesn't deserve leniency because she was manipulated by Marcus Westbrook. She deserves the full weight of federal justice because she made conscious choices to destroy lives. She planned, she executed, she escalated, and when her frame-up didn't work, she was prepared to commit mass murder. The defense attorney shifted uncomfortably. The psychological evaluations had painted Karen as a woman driven to extremes by depression and jealousy, but Sarah's testimony was cutting through those excuses with surgical precision. This isn't about revenge, Your Honor. This is about consequences. Karen Westbrook needs to understand that you can't destroy other people's lives without destroying your own. That actions have costs. That jealousy and hatred are choices, not inevitable responses to disappointment. Sarah glanced at the gallery, where Maya sat in the front row. Her wife's face was proud but serious, understanding the gravity of this moment. 6 months ago, I was a victim. Today, I'm a survivor. But more than that, I'm a police officer who still believes in justice, still believes in the system, still believes that good people can win when they fight for what's right. Karen Westbrook tried to prove that belief was naive. Instead, she proved it was necessary. Judge Hoffman nodded. "Thank you, Detective Chen. Please be seated." The defense attorney's closing argument was brief and unconvincing. Karen Westbrook, she argued, was a victim of manipulation, a woman broken by divorce and financial stress who fell under the influence of a career criminal. The prosecution's rebuttal was devastating. 3 pounds of C4 explosives don't lie, and intent to commit mass murder isn't mitigated by personal problems. When Karen was asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, she stood slowly, her lawyer's hand on her arm. "Your Honor," Karen said, her voice barely audible, "I want to apologize to Detective Chen and her wife for what I put them through. I want to apologize to this court and to everyone who was in danger because of my actions." She paused, tears running down her face. "I can't explain why I did what I did. I was angry, I was jealous, I was lust. I thought Detective Chen had everything I wanted, and I couldn't stand seeing her happiness when my own life was falling apart." Karen looked directly at Sarah for the first time. "I understand now that I was wrong. That my problems were my own responsibility, not something to blame on other people. I understand that what I did was unforgivable. I just hope that someday Detective Chen can find it in her heart to forgive me anyway." Judge Hoffman consulted her notes, then looked up with the expression of someone who had spent decades weighing justice against mercy. "Ms. Westbrook, the court acknowledges your apology, but words cannot undo the harm you caused or the lives you endangered. You conspired to frame an innocent police officer for federal crimes. You violated her home, her privacy, her sense of security. You corrupted a public employee to gain access to confidential information." The judge's voice grew harder. "Most seriously, you attempted to detonate explosives in a federal courthouse with the intent to commit mass murder. The fact that you were motivated by jealousy rather than terrorism doesn't diminish the gravity of your actions." Karen swayed slightly, gripping the table for support. "The court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. You will serve this sentence at FCI Danbury, a medium security facility where you will have access to counseling and educational programs. The court recommends that you use this time to examine the choices that led you here and to find a way to contribute positively to society when you are eventually released." The gavel fell with finality. Karen Westbrook, who had wanted to see Sarah Chen brought low, would spend the next quarter-century in federal prison. Marcus Westbrook, sentenced the previous month, had received life without parole for domestic terrorism and conspiracy charges. As the courtroom cleared, Sarah stood outside with Maya, watching the news crews pack up their equipment. The story was over, the cameras were moving on to the next scandal, but the consequences would last for decades. "How do you feel?" Maya asked, taking Sarah's hand. "Relieved," Sarah said. "But also sad. Karen destroyed her life trying to destroy ours. In the end, she hurt herself more than she ever hurt us. Do you forgive her?" Sarah considered the question. "I don't know if forgiveness is the right word. But I understand her. I understand what jealousy and bitterness can do to someone if they let it consume them. I feel sorry for who she became." They walked toward their car, past the memorial fountain where Sarah had once thought her career might end. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps, and Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. "Maya," she said as they reached the car, "when we get home, I want to do something." "What?" "I want to invite the neighbors over. For dinner. All of them. I want to celebrate the fact that we survived, that we are still here, that our life is still ours." Maya smiled. "Even the new people who moved into Karen's old apartment. Especially them. They need to know that our neighborhood is about community. Not competition. About helping each other, not tearing each other down." As they drove through Queens toward their home, Sarah felt the weight of the past 6 months finally lifting. She'd been tested in ways she never imagined, forced to fight for everything she valued, stripped down to her core beliefs about justice and fairness and the fundamental goodness of people. She'd emerged from that test stronger, clearer about what mattered, more committed to the principles that had guided her career. But most importantly, she'd learned that some victories aren't about defeating your enemies, they are about refusing to become them. Karen Westbrook had tried to prove that good people were just bad people who hadn't been tested hard enough. Instead, she'd proven the opposite, that good people, when tested, become better people. That integrity under pressure isn't weakness, it's strength. That choosing justice over revenge isn't naive, it's necessary. 3 weeks later, Sarah returned to active duty with the NYPD. Her first case was a domestic violence investigation involving a woman whose ex-husband was stalking her, threatening her new relationship, trying to destroy her chance at happiness. As Sarah took the victim's statement, she thought about Karen Westbrook in her federal prison cell. She thought about the choices people make when faced with other people's happiness and the different paths those choices can lead to. Detective. The victim asked, "Do you think he'll really leave me alone if you arrest him?" Sarah looked at the woman, young, scared, but determined to build a new life despite the threats, and saw something familiar. She saw someone worth fighting for, someone whose happiness was under attack by someone who couldn't stand to see others succeed. "I can't promise he'll leave you alone," Sarah said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had faced down the worst in people and survived. "But I can promise you this, we're going to do everything in our power to protect you. And if he tries to hurt you or destroy your life, he's going to face the full consequences of that choice." Sarah pulled out her badge, the S